Well, hello. Welcome back to another exciting edition of Coffee with Stephen. So last week's blog was entitled Paris, and as you guys may remember, Sandy and I and Kayvon had traveled to Paris for a convention, and then Sandy and I subsequently stayed on to kind of be a little touristy stuff. This week's blog is entitled Virginia. Not because we were in Virginia, but because of some developments, legislative developments that have taken place over the last week in the state of Virginia. Without going into too much detail, the internet started buzzing with a story that proposed legislation had been put into the Senate of Virginia to effectively outlaw firearms training. Now that's not entirely an accurate statement, but it goes in their general direction. As you may remember, in the last election cycle, the Democrats were able to control both the governorship as well as both of the Senate and the House of the Virginia legislature. Well, they immediately began trying to create gun control legislation. The first piece of gun control legislation is a modification to an existing law that essentially says that anybody that trains an individual in the use of firearms or destructive devices, knowing that the individual could use these things in furtherance of a civil disturbance. And that becomes the sort of the actionable part. A civil disturbance is guilty of committing a felony. Now, that has all sorts of constitutional implications associated with it, but even on a broader scale, a militia, which is what they're effectively kind of banning this law about, saying that it's to prevent militias from forming. Well, as you may recall from your elementary school days, our country was founded on militias. The militia that formed at Lexington and Concord were private citizens that drilled regularly that decided they were going to stop British tyranny. It's ironic that in the land of Thomas Jefferson, they are now trying to make it illegal for people to participate in what we would call militia activities. More specific, though, even if you're not necessarily participating in a militia, but you are looking to defend yourself or learn how to defend yourself, it could be construed that you are doing this in furtherance of civil disturbance, because after all, an armed populace is going to, by definition, create a limitation on government. And because there's that limitation, is that act in and of itself a civil disturbance. It can be interpreted in an incredibly broad way. Now, what's interesting is not so much the legislation. It's crap, it's garbage, and I think it's unconstitutional. What is interesting is the public reaction to it. The number of sheriffs in Virginia that have now openly stated they will not follow this law, which is one of the reasons why we have elected sheriffs. In fact, they've started creating sanctuary counties, Second Amendment sanctuary counties, an interesting take on the illegal alien sanctuary cities that we have in California and other places across the country. Regardless, in the blog, I juxtapose what's taking place in Hong Kong with what's currently taking place now in Virginia. I highly encourage you guys to read this and to stay informed of what's going on there. As always, train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. And above all else, stay safe.